You had a post where you said something to the effect of like bad storytelling kills startups.
I see a lot of incredible products or founders who are solving real problems for their customers, but really struggle to be able to communicate in a way to people so that they not only understand, but they're excited. Most people, I think, post for very selfish reasons and don't spend a lot of time thinking about their audience, which is why I think the engagement isn't as powerful as it could be.
Let's get scratching.
My name is Caitlin Bigelow. I'm the Chief Marketing Officer at Blazel. That's right, no more of this head of title bullshit. I'm in the VC-funded big leagues now, growing an AI startup in the heart of Silicon Valley. You're tuning into the Grown On podcast, where we talk about leaders who have found their voice to build their brand organically on social. So I invite people onto the podcast whose content makes me jealous. If they are witty, insightful, hilarious, and I want to steal their playbooks, they would make the perfect guest. Today, I'm welcoming Olivia O'Sullivan. Olivia is a general partner at Forum Ventures. Her content slays on LinkedIn. She has 26,000 followers, but more impressively, her posts often reach thousands of engagements. Olivia, welcome on the podcast.
Thanks so much for having me, Caitlin. I'm very excited to be here and chatting with you today.
So one thing that I saw when kind of doing my background on this was that you were a creative writing major in college. I can't imagine that there's a whole lot of VCs that started in creative writing and ended up in venture. Did you get lost?
I think now in hindsight, I can tell a very, clear story looking in the rearview mirror of how one step led to the next. But certainly when I was in it, felt a little less clear and meandering. I think now more people are aware of this as a career. We see a ton of kind of young talent coming out just out of university who are really excited about venture, but that was not the case when I was in college. And I really had my eyes set on becoming a writer, which was why I studied English and creative writing. At some point, though, I asked myself, as many people do, how do I make money as a writer in this profession? And so that led me to marketing, which is where I started my career. What's interesting, though, is I have always been obsessed with human psychology, what moves people to make decisions, storytelling being part of that. And I think, interestingly, it has given me a different insight and advantage on the investing side. Obviously, as companies, startups get more mature, the decision-making process can be much more quantitative. But at the stage where Forum is investing, which is often first institutional check into the business, there's often not much on the metrics front. So a lot of our decisioning process really does come down to people and stories and believing in a future that we share with the founder.
You had a post that really kind of caught my attention where you said something to the effect of like, bad storytelling kills startups.
I think storytelling has a bad rap sometimes in both the startup world and business in general, because it feels intangible sometimes or squishy. But if we think about what is fundamentally true when you are starting and growing a business, we have to be able to effectively communicate things to people and persuade them to take action in some way. That might be they take action to schedule a demo with us. They take action to become one of our customers. You join as an early employee. And that is, sales, communication, marketing, whatever we want to call it, is so foundational to that. What I meant in that post is I see a lot of incredible products or founders who are solving real problems for their customers, but really struggle to be able to communicate in a way to people so that they not only understand, but they're excited about the product, the opportunity, what this future state looks like, and they want to come on board for the ride. They want to join as you are building this. And I think if we're unable to communicate effectively, it doesn't matter how amazing your product is or how awesome your technology is. It's not going to get into the hands of the correct people on the customer side. Investors are not going to have confidence in where you are going as a company or how you are leading as a founder.
How do you convince someone to leave Google to join your little startup that has, a success rate chance of this small?
100%. I say all the time, early stage is so irrational because you have so little information. You don't have all of these case studies, right? You don't have, the brand recognition of Google.
The metrics and the revenue.
Right. And you probably don't have, unlimited money to pay people, the best perks in the world, a cushy office, all these things. And so your ability to get people excited about your vision, about what the future is going to look like if you do your job and you are successful and that they are going to be a part of that, that is what gets early customers to take a risk when there's no case studies and be your design partner or be your first customer. It's what gets employees, as you said, to leave their cushy jobs at Google to join you on this mission. And it's what gets investors excited of, yes, that is also how we see the future. And we believe that you are the founder that's going to help us build that future.
Yeah, absolutely. So it's funny because I used to tell early stage founders that the playbook was like, if you were, cash strapped, bootstrapped, kind of hustling it, that the way that you got the message out was really through like SEO and blogs. Like that was in my last startup. That was the way that I built the customer base, is like I had no money. It was me and a laptop. And, I generated 10,000 MQLs just from blogs, right?
Awesome.
I think that playbook doesn't work anymore, or it's it's shifting how that works, right? Like people say clickless world. OpenAI was quoted basically saying like websites are going to die because people, of course that's very self-serving for them, but to some extent, like I think there's truth. There's some kernels of truth in that statement. I don't care about websites the way I used to. And so I think people are looking for new organic channels to get surfaced in. And for me, like one of the premium channels to be on is LinkedIn. And so I want to talk a little bit about your strategy around LinkedIn. You're posting 4 to 5 times a week on LinkedIn. Kind of what was it that made you decide? I mean, that's a significant amount of time and energy to put that together. Mm-hmm. Was there like a moment where you were like, okay, this is something I'm going to test and try? And like, kind of how did you get from the start to where you are now?
Yeah. So when I first started at Forum 7 years ago, we were a tiny team of 4 and nobody knew who we were. We had no brand recognition. Nobody knew who we were. We got almost no inbound. Every investment that we made came from us hustling, pounding the pavement, outbounding to people, meeting people at events.
People don't think of that as the VC piece, right? That's not where, I don't think that's where founders are like, oh, VCs have to hustle and build the brand too, but that's super true.
Totally. Because I think our views in many times of funds, which makes sense because brand recognition is a powerful thing, is we think about these funds that are true institutions that have been around for decades and have incredible brand power. Everyone knows who A16Z is. Everyone has heard of Benchmark. Everyone knows Floodgate. Everyone has heard of Y Combinator. These are people who, one, have had lots of success that backs up their brand, but have built credibility and established themselves in a category. So I think most people view funds as everyone's in that bucket. So, why would investors need to hustle for deals? Because everyone wants Sequoia on their cap table, which is probably true. But when you're an emerging manager or building an emerging firm, nobody knows who you are, and you don't really have a track record in terms of long-term success. And it takes a long time to build one in venture because sometimes these cycles are 10 plus years. And so much like founders need to build awareness and get people to know who they are when nobody's ever heard of you. Funds, when they're just getting started, have to do the same. We've spent a lot of that time thinking about how do we build more awareness and how do we become the top of mind fund for early stage B2B founders who are looking for their first check into their business. Social has always been something that we've thought about. Firms, even more so, I would say, than companies. Firms have brands, but so much of the feeling of a firm, of a fund, is made up of all of the individual partners and investors and employees who work there. And in aggregate, that is an experience that founders are very interested in. Yes, your fund can exist as a brand, but each partner, each investor contributes to that. The moment where I feel like I got serious about posting on LinkedIn was actually in March. I had been posting semi-regularly, but not with any real consistency, not multiple times a week, not really spending that much time on the platform, but I had posted somewhat ad hocly and was starting to get fairly positive feedback from founders that I was meeting in the ecosystem, whether at events in person or online, or when they were emailing me and saying, "Oh, I really like your content. I appreciate what you're posting or your perspective. I'm really excited about the opportunity to partner with Forum or explore what it looked like for us to join your portfolio." So I started seeing some of these sort of early kindlings. We also started to see at a firm level, more founders were telling us that they were finding us through LinkedIn and through social. So we have a pitch form that exists on our website. Last year, we had almost 6,000 people submit that form. And we started to see the number of people saying, where did we hear about you, was from LinkedIn, or team members who are posting on LinkedIn. So we started to see these early leading indicators that founders were spending time on LinkedIn and they were finding us through those channels. So March, I decided to give myself a 2-week challenge. I'm like, okay, we've got all these leading indicators that are showing it's working. It's powerful. What if I commit to posting every day for 2 weeks and just see what happens? And can I build the habit of showing up and posting? And over those 2 weeks, I started to see tons of momentum in engagement. I started to have more founders email me, DM me saying, "Wow, I love your content. Would love to learn more about Forum." We saw the number of pitches that were getting submitted, citing that they heard about us LinkedIn, starting to go up. And after those 2 weeks, I said, okay, I have enough proof points that this is worth dedicating time to. So why don't I put on my marketing hat and say, all right, what's my mission vision for why I'm actually posting? Who are the people that I'm trying to get in front of? What value do I want to be able to deliver them? And how am I going to ultimately continue to measure this and iterate? So that is sort of how the LinkedIn journey started.
That's incredible. So can I show you some kind of fun analytics?
I'd love that. Yes.
We put this together at Blazel, and what we're looking at here is a dashboard where we have looked at all of the top VC profiles across LinkedIn. So there's approximately 550 VCs in here. So this is you, Olivia. You're right here. You've got your 26,000 followers, average 156 engagements. And so this was one of the things that I thought was pretty cool. So, you're in the top 9% of VCs in terms of the cadence in which you're posting. So you're posting more than 91% of other VCs.
Yeah.
Your total engagements in the top 10% and average engagements in the top 30. And so this chart here, I think really shows us is, most VCs are posting once to twice a week.
Yeah.
Which this is actually a much more active industry vertical than some of the other verticals. Like we have, AI, fintech, real estate, kind of all these other verticals you could look at. And so the VCs in general are very active on LinkedIn, which kind of makes sense. But here you are over here, you're posting way more frequently than other people. And then I thought the other thing that was kind of neat on this was kind of this performance radar we built out, which you can see your engagements are like, are spiking outward. So people really love and are engaging with the content you're putting out there.
That is super cool to see. I'll have to see how by the end of 2026 where I've shifted on the graph.
Come back and we'll run your numbers again for you. Why do you think your engagement numbers are so high? How do you get engagement on this platform?
Most people I find when they talk about engagement on LinkedIn is focused on what I would call more hacks or structural things. So people will say, you've got to have a really good hook, which I think is true. You have to give people a reason to care and want to read your post. I could post the same thing with a slightly different first sentence, and that obviously impacts, do people care about this and want to read more? But a lot of what I find people spend time on is, what time of day should I post? How frequently should I post? What are formattings that I can do that will help drive engagement? I've gone through, I'm an obsessive person, a rabbit hole person. I've gone through, the rigmarole of analyzing viral posts. I've downloaded, transcripts about the creator economy and fed them into ChatGPT and created guides. Like, I have used some of that information, but what I think is actually the most important is understanding your audience and why they should engage in your post. And so this, I think, again, is from my marketing background. I spend a lot of time thinking about what's my vision and mission for why I am posting content. Like, what's my goal with all of this? And like, aspirationally, what am I trying to do? And so I think a lot about, all right, what are my goals, ambitions with this? And if I'm trying to get in front of early stage B2B founders or founders to be, I'm also thinking about what are their ambitions, goals, insecurities, things that they care about. And all of my content, I try to have sit at the intersection of those two things. I have things I need to accomplish by posting here, but ultimately I need to help the people that I am trying to reach. Part of my mission is I want to help democratize early stage company building and fundraising. I want to pull back the curtain and demystify venture, which is a sort of weird, convoluted, closed door industry. And I want to be able to help people in achieving their dreams when it comes to building. That's why I think I get a lot of engagement, is because I genuinely think about my audience. And once I have that foundation, do I think about how do I optimize the hook of every post? What will be things that calls to action or ways that I frame things that I know will allow people to feel excited about dropping a comment versus just reading and moving on? So there are those structural things that I think about, but most people, I think, post for very selfish reasons and don't spend a lot of time thinking about their audience, which is why I think the engagement isn't as powerful as it could be.
I love how you framed that. Don't post for selfish reasons. It's like, so another guest on the podcast was Josh Lohman, and the way he kind of framed it was like, think about your ideal customer and the people you're trying to reach, and you say, what is the big, difficult problem that's standing in the way of their aspirations?
Yeah.
And how do you create content that helps them alleviate that problem, that shows them that you understand that problem, right?
Yeah.
And so I think the content that I see doing so well, and like some of your content that I really like, it's so education focused and like framework focused. Like, this is the problem you're having. Here's how you get on the other side of that problem.
Yeah.
We're also seeing that LinkedIn really likes that type of content as well, right? We're seeing that if you're getting kind of saves or kind of the bookmarks of things where people want to go back and reference that piece of content later, that's expanding the reach of that. So that makes total sense. But I've never thought about it in the framework of like, don't be selfish with your content. And I'm going to start using that. The other problem people make is they say like, okay, I'm going to do thought leadership.
Yeah.
But it's really just like product placement wrapped in like this veneer of thought leadership. It's very off-putting. No one wants to hear you self-promote all day long about your content. There's a reason
Yeah.
why people pay for advertisements. It's because you have, like that's the reason. We don't want them.
Yes. And I think that there is a way that you can still drive what you want, which is people to use your product or leads to get in your funnel, without necessarily doing just product promo in your posts. But yeah, I think a lot of founders, even in my own portfolio, who start are like, great, I'm just going to do viral posts that's like drop a comment to get this playbook and hope that I fill up my whole pipeline. And then they're like, why is no one engaging with this? I think when we neglect the audience, because there are times where those posts can work very well,
Yeah.
but there is nuance in how you think about them, of like, if you're telling people in your posts, like, do your internal operations totally suck and everything is chaotic? Like, comment chaos for our operations playbook. It's like, okay, think about this. The person who you're trying to reach, this ops leader, already feels like everything is chaotic. Their company is a shit show and they do want help with this. But do you think that they are going to comment publicly,
raise their hand,
where now everyone's going to say like, oh my God, Olivia is an ops disaster? And so much of it is like, you really do need to understand your audience's insecurities. What are their ambitions? What motivates them? So that when you are posting, they say, oh, this person sees me. This person understands my problems, my goals, and they are helping me either feel seen and supported and helping me get there. And then like the tactics that you use, you can still deploy a lot of this stuff. Like I've seen great success with the comment this, but so much of it depends on understanding the audience. And a lot of people skip over that piece.
I think you also have to think too about who your ideal customer persona is, because different types of people at different levels are going to be more likely to engage with comment in the first place, or engage with a post in the first place. So like, generally, like, and like the way that I think about too, when someone is engaging with a piece of content on LinkedIn, it's like a really public signal. I mean, I've thought about like, oh, I would really like this thing, but I don't want everyone to know that I would want this thing, right? Like kind of to your point here. But, we're seeing too, like if you're targeting, C-suite of, Series B and above kind of companies, they're not going to be on there commenting all the time and liking all this stuff. You have to also look for kind of intent signals outside of engagement. And like I've seen, and like we even do this within Blazel, being able to layer on an outbound strategy based on the intent signals you're seeing can be a really powerful way to kind of drive actual pipeline and revenue on LinkedIn.
100%. I think there is a necessity in many instances of whether it's through DMs, through emails, how do you actually turn some of this into more structured social selling? Whereas, the content visibility, the engagement is building that awareness. So when, they see you in your DMs or an email comes from you, they're like, oh, I already know Caitlin. And I know you've seen as well, like a lot of your historic content, people might not be engaging in the comment section, but you're getting, CEOs who are DMing you and saying, oh, like, I actually do want your help because I see all this great work that you're doing for other people. I'm not going to drop a comment on this, but I'm going to engage in a way that feels comfortable for me.
Yeah, this was a while ago, but I had a post that had pretty much horrible engagement. I think there was like 14 likes on the post or something, but it was all about executive profiles and how executives often make mistakes on their profile optimization on LinkedIn, and they're like kind of leaving stuff on the table because they've set up profiles kind of like how we all join LinkedIn, like these digital resumes, when really you can be thinking about it almost as like these mini landing pages of like, how do you get people the information to kind of connect them into like the next step in your funnel. So anyway, the post did pretty poorly because it was targeting these executives and C-suite that are not going to comment on any of this stuff. I had this CEO of a unicorn company DM me saying, hey, can you help me optimize my profile? I think that's an exact use case. And people get tied up in the vanity metrics, right? Like that post was a huge 100%. Success for me. But from the outside, like the public perception of, did that post do well? 14 likes feels like a flop.
Totally. And I tell this to founders as well when they're starting out, because I think that there is a lot of fear or anxiety of putting yourself out there publicly, which is true because one, there is the perception that things are not performing well. I'm a failure. This is terrible. Nobody likes what I'm saying. Or what if I say something wrong? What if it doesn't resonate with people? And I often say to founders, one, when we start anything, we're all beginners. Everyone is so obsessed with themselves that nobody even notices if your post only got 5 likes. So don't worry, no one cares. But chasing likes and engagement is not always the thing that we should be optimizing for.
I would say it's rarely the thing to optimize.
Totally. And so I think with founders, part of what you have to figure out is like, what are the leading indicators that you want to see? Is it that you're using LinkedIn because you're trying to hire great talent? And these are the things that you're hoping to see. The long tail is that you close great talent. Thinking about what are some of those initial indicators? Because to your point, you could have posts that look like, oh, they're getting fairly minimal engagement. But if you are able then to turn that into when you DM, someone to ask for a discovery call, they're more likely to get on the phone with you and you're seeing an increase in that. That's amazing and super successful. And it doesn't matter that you have only 10,000 followers on LinkedIn. You are achieving your goals. Right. I think too much of the narrative oftentimes is like chase followers. How does this grow? And you get too, like I always say to people, if you're talking about something that applies very broadly, like being a modern career professional and how does that evolve? Or how do you use AI as a employee? Those are super broad strokes and apply to lots of different people. I am selling to lawyers who work at this kind of company. We already have like a smaller subset of people.
You're talking to a very small audience. You naturally have small engagement.
Yeah.
And I'm so glad you brought that up. Some of my most viral posts have been the least helpful in terms of actually driving any kind of meaningful business for me.
Yeah.
Because it was a topic that anyone felt like they could opine on and appealed to a broad audience. And because of that, right, your ICP gets super diluted in all of that.
Yeah.
So there are, 500 portfolio companies now in Forum Ventures?
Yes, it's getting big.
It's a lot of portfolio companies. And you're really kind of the heart and soul of kind of, help guiding them, supporting them, helping them with their strategy. You've talked about what the LinkedIn playbook is. So maybe you can outline what is the LinkedIn playbook for founders in your portfolio?
Generally, what we work with founders on is kind of back to what we're talking about, first starting of like, who is our actual ICP? Because oftentimes founders that we're working with are very early on in the journey. They might not have any customers, or maybe they have one. And so sometimes we're using LinkedIn among other channels to try to have discovery calls to actually figure out who is our ICP. Because sometimes people have a couple hypotheses of who do we think has this problem? Who do we think actually has the urgency to move forward, but we're not exactly sure who it is because we only have one customer or we have no customers. And so we'll use that initially to say, let's figure out who are the people who are experiencing this problem. They are desperate for a solution. They will pull this out of our hands. We don't have to push them over the hill. They are excited and they're early enough on the adoption curve that they're willing to take a risk. They're not like, I need 10 case studies and a lot of evidence before I'm going to say yes to working with you.
Yeah.
So we'll often use it as a tool to help people validate that ICP. And then once we have that, we take them through a similar exercise to how I think about my content, which are what's our ambition and goals for posting on this channel, so we can get really clear about what needs to be true for us to continue investing in this channel. And then 2, let's do the same thing for our ICP. What do we know about these people from a psychographic standpoint? What are their ambitions? What do they care about in work? What are their goals? What are the things that are blocking them? What makes them feel insecure? What are their worries? So that we can have a sense of what that looks like. And then in the intersection, we help people create content pillars. Oftentimes, one of those content pillars might be a little bit more personal or builder focused, of saying like, I'm a founder, I'm in this building journey, it's very messy. I'm going to talk about what that looks like. And then we likely have 2 other pillars that really resonate with that ICP audience. Maybe for some people that's maybe your audience is data junkies. They love seeing interesting trends and you're going to post, first party insights that you have coming from your platform to make sure that people are feeling top of mind. So we walk through what those content pillars look like. And then we help give people playbooks of best practices for how you think about structuring your posts, how we think about building hooks, what does make sense in terms of how we're posting. The posting helps drive some of this, but we build out target lists and we say, who are the thought leaders who are in this space already, or people who are in our ICP on our target list that are already posting on LinkedIn? How do we engage with those people? We like their posts, we comment on things. And then how do we start sending connection requests to the people that are on our target list? So, maybe we're also going to email these people at some point, but how do we start adding these people so that when they're accepting our connection requests, they are starting to see us pop up in their feed. They're seeing our name come about elsewhere. And then we run like more of a traditional social selling playbook where we're thinking about how do we start really relevant conversations with people in their DMs. Oftentimes we really lean on, because founders are super early in their journey, we lean a lot on asking for perspective. It's like, Caitlin, you're a CMO. You've got decades of experience in the marketing space. I'm an early stage founder just starting out on a product. I'd love to get your perspective on what we're building to make sure that we're moving in the right direction. And those then, as you start with a discovery call, and many of those people end up going into their pipeline. Obviously, for companies who are a little bit further along, we might do, a slightly more forward kind of engagement as we're thinking about either moving those people to emails or, using some LinkedIn outreach tools, maybe Hey Reach or something to help us scale some of that.
The analytics that I just showed you earlier, we're using that in like outbound sales calls of like, hey, do you want to see what your data looks like? How do you stack up in your industry against the competitors in your space? Like we can so any kind of that proprietary stuff where people feel like they're getting something of value in the outreach.
If we're saying like, hey, we've worked with a ton of companies to benchmark this, or we've given people this free audit, like we'd love to do that for you. We're just figuring out ways like, can we open the door for a conversation for people? And what I think is great is when someone emails you and you've never heard of them, you're like faceless person with no context, and you can only do so much in a cold email. Whereas if you've been exposed to someone's content for the last couple of weeks, or you're seeing them show up in conversations that you're already following along in, the power of, the parasocial relationship, the kind of peripheral affinity, people feel like they know you, they are aware of you, and they're more likely, we see, to say yes to a conversation.
100%. Yeah, I completely agree with that. So there's this kind of prevailing adage that to get VC funding, you have to have a warm intro.
Yeah.
Be honest, is that still true? And does social kind of play a role in this?
I think that if you can get a warm intro, it is certainly helpful. And while I'm very proud of the fact that more than 50% of the deals that we signed last year came from inbound at Forum, and we love talking to founders from inbound, that is not the case with all funds. And
that's a huge percentage.
Yeah. It used to be like 0.
So you're saying 50% of the deals that Forum invested in last year were inbound?
52%.
52%.
Yes.
That's cool.
It is cool. And it's a big part of our strategy. How do we make sure that we are top of mind for people? Social is a big part of that. We do a lot of AEO. We do a ton of community building and events. And yeah, we've gone from 7 years ago when I started, we got 0 inbound. And last year, we got over 6,000 companies that pitched us inbound. So I think a warm intro helps. If we think about intros in any regard, you're borrowing the trust and rapport someone has already built. So if I know you, Caitlin, I trust you, we've got a great relationship. If you tell me to meet someone, I'm already assuming this must be a good person because I trust Caitlin. So I'm going to take Caitlin's word for the conversation. So I think we cannot ignore that. If you're able to borrow someone's trust and they're open to using their social currency for you, it definitely helps. However, we don't have warm intros to every investor. As a founder, you might not have any warm intros to founders in your network. I would advise every founder, though, when they're building out their target investor list, send that list before you kick off your fundraise to all the people that you think could help you. Your former colleagues, if you have founder friends, do you have angels or advisors? Do you have existing investors? Activate everyone you can to say, can you review this list and mark your name if you know anyone and would be open to facilitating an intro if I send you a forwardable? Because then you can at least see, all right, who do I have covered from my existing network? Right. And then you've got some subset of people that you definitely don't have connections to. And so you have to figure out, how do I get in front of these people? Maybe they're speaking at an event that you can go to. Maybe you have to reach out cold. And what I always tell founders is great cold emails can be effective, but you do need to spend some amount of time putting effort into them, which I get a ton of inbound where I'm like, you didn't even read my thesis. This is like a blasted email that you probably sent to 500 emails. Yeah, this doesn't make me want to call you. What you really want to figure out is like, why am I actually reaching out to this person? Did I hear a podcast? Did you post something in your thesis that really resonated with me? Did you invest in an adjacent company that I think makes a ton of sense? If you're connected with any founders in their portfolio, like activate those people, or, a portfolio referral is always super strong. But I think that those cold emails, if they are specific, if they are to the point and they are clear, and I share a ton of templates on LinkedIn about like, how should you reach out to a VC? I think that you have the ability to be able to get a call. Where I think social helps is for the same reason we're talking about with customers or potential talent, is you are visible to people out in the ecosystem. And if I see a founder that I've been seeing pop up on my feed or is like commenting on my posts, if they send me an email, I'm like, oh, I've like chatted with this person in my comment section, or, oh, I've seen this person sharing about their building journey. I've reached out to founders because I say, wow, I love what they're sharing. I love what they're building. I want to have a conversation with this person. And so I think it does us the same thing as we're talking about earlier. It creates this awareness before you've ever had a conversation with the person, so that when you show up in their inbox, they recognize you. And maybe this isn't going to be the case, if I'm the GP at Sequoia, am I going to be like spending all my time browsing LinkedIn? Like, maybe not. But I think there are people at every fund, whether it's an associate, whether it's the general partner, who are spending time sharing their own content, exploring, DMing founders on LinkedIn who are in stealth to try to get into and talk to people before they're actively raising. And the more you can surface yourself in their line of sight, the better.
But this kind of goes back to some kind of topics we hinted about earlier, which is build the audience before you need the audience. Right? If you're showing up on social day one going, okay, I need these, I need to generate leads. I need to make my first hire. Now I'm in fundraising mode. Like, social is not paid ads. It's not something you just turn on in an instant. You build kind of audience and credibility over time, and it's organic. Yep. And there's value in that, of people seeing you just show up authentically as yourself. And then when you do need that audience, whether it's for any of those things we just talked about, you've got kind of this stockpile of trust and brand recognition already built, which is so powerful.
100%.
Okay. So Olivia, my final question then for you is, who are your favorite people to follow on LinkedIn right now?
I have so many people I love to follow on LinkedIn. I know you're having one of my favorites on an upcoming podcast episode, Peter Walker, who I love about all things. A few others that I love, Janine Swa. She talks a lot about multi-hyphenate go-to-market operator, the early employees at companies. Mallory Contois, I love a lot of her work. She's talking about kind of career building. She's currently the head of growth at Maven. And I have to give a special shout out to my colleague, Dallas Price, who has also been really picking up his LinkedIn game. And I love hearing all of his takes and perspectives on stuff. So those are the first ones that come to mind.
I'll pull his stats and send them over.
Yeah. Yeah, love that.
Amazing. Well, Olivia, thank you so much for sharing all of your insights today. Really appreciate it. And Peter Walker from Carta is actually the next guest on the podcast. So,
well, you guys are in for a treat. He is awesome, and I'm sure we'll have lots of good insights to share. It helps that he has such amazing data to be able to visualize and package. I think that is first party data is next level for people. Yeah. Amazing. Well, thanks so much for having me, Caitlin. This was a ton of fun.
All right. Take care, Olivia. Thanks.